Welcome to Perfectly Knotty's workshop number 2 on swatching. Take one. Have you ever spent, most of us have, some weeks or months, a long time, a lot of effort making something, whether it's a garment or a bag or maybe even something like a hat or whatever, and you finish it and you realize that it doesn't fit you, doesn't fit the way that you want it to. Um, it's not the size or the shape. It didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to. Ugh. And our hearts just ache because we put all this effort and this work into this beloved project and it didn't turn out the way that we wanted. And that's when you remember you decided you were smarty pants and you weren't going to swatch. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm Suzi Quillen. I am your stitching coach. I'm the Empress of Yarn here at Perfectly Knotty, and I am here to help knitters and crocheters like you level up your skills so that you can make heirloom quality things. I provide you with clear instructions and encouragement and practical information and support. And today we're talking about our swatching mindset. So this is the shift that we're going to talk about today. Swatching is a horrible chore. It's a tedious, extra, unnecessary task. It's hard work. It's not as fun. I don't want to do it. But here is how I want you to actually start thinking about it. I want you to start thinking about swatching as just simply part of the project. Okay? Think about it like this. It's kind of like dating. When you're swatching, you're giving the opportunity for your yarn and your tools and your pattern to get to know each other, to decide if they want to spend the rest of their lives together in a big old project that means something to you. There you go. That's all it is. It's just testing the waters, just like dating. So the big question is, do you have to swatch? And the truth is, you don't have to do anything because you're a grown up and you can do whatever you want. But if you want predictable results in your knitting and your crochet, especially if you are making garments, then yes, you should swatch. Should you swatch every single time? Maybe, maybe not. And we are going to talk about that. But the problem when you skip the swatching because you have decided that it's a whole unnecessary extra step before you get to start the fun stuff, you're rolling the dice, really. And you're taking a risk in wasting weeks of time and even your good yarn because some of our yarns will tolerate being stitched and pulled out and stitched and pulled out so you can test and trial as you go, but some of them do not tolerate that. So, helping you to achieve your goals and overcome this frustration and take the guesswork out of starting your project, taking the guesswork out of how is it actually going to turn out, we're going to talk about that in swatching. Okay, so first thing, what is the biggest mistake? Is that we often make a swatch that is too small. Sometimes we make little swatches that are just enough stitches to kind of get a general idea. If you're making an afghan or scarf or something that isn't meant to fit, doesn't need to have drape and movement, other things, you can get away with that. And I think what I want you to understand in all of this conversation really is that the more that you learn and know and understand the yarns that you use, because a lot of us have a few yarns that we use like really a lot, and we go back to a similar type of yarn on a regular basis. We start to understand how our personal ergonomics, the knitting needles and crochet hooks we like to use, the stitches we like to use, we start learning to understand how those tools together will create a fabric. And we can we can sometimes, once we really have an established knowledge, we don't have to do as involved of a gauge swatch. These ones that I'm going to show you some things with after a little bit, these are made with classic Red Heart Super Saver worsted weight. I have made enough things with this over the years that I have a pretty good idea of how it is going to respond with different size hooks I might use, different size knitting needles that I might use. And I know what to expect. I may not be super, super precise, but I have a pretty general idea. So I don't need to make a full scale swatch necessarily. But do I? So one of the things that gets to be a little bit problematic is that we want to shortcut our swatching by making swatches that are just big enough. And I'm going to talk to you about why that works and why that doesn't work, okay? So where that does work is when you really, really already know and understand a yarn that you use all the time. We're going to talk about in a few minutes. This is just classic Red Heart Super Saver. I have made enough things with this over the last 40 years that I have a pretty good understanding of how it is going to respond with a larger crochet hook like I did in this sample, or a smaller one. And I don't have to do huge amounts of swatching, but if I'm making something that needs to fit, if I'm making something like a sweater for a grandkid that I want it to fit the way the pattern is calling for, I'll do a swatch. I may or I may not do a big swatch. I just need to know what is my stitch width and height. But here's the thing that I do not want you to shortcut. And this is where we're going to talk about making a larger swatch. Most of your swatches are measured on 4 inches by 4 inches. And we have a tendency then to make our swatches 4 inches by 4 inches. But if you are knitting, you'll notice here, look how my edges are curling. Because in stockinette stitch, our stitches curl. It's just an inherent nature of the fabric. You'll even notice up here with my crochet piece, this is single crochet, and you can see even here, it's just naturally curling. That is an inherent nature of the fabric. It doesn't matter what the yarn is. That's just what the way that the stitches move together, it makes the fabric do these things. So I'm going to go ahead and take this knitting needle out. Hope that didn't scare anybody, but it will help. This swatch up here in crochet is it's 8 3/4 inches wide. It is 5 1/8 inches tall. And yes, I am using a carpentry measuring tape. We'll talk about that too. Here's my knitting swatch. It is curling. If I were to pull it out flat and measure it without stretching it, but just out flat, it is 6 1/4 inches wide, and it is 5 3/4 we're going to actually go to 5 1/4 because these are the loose loops I just pulled out. 5 1/4 inches tall. I like this because it's rigid and I can lock it and it'll stay. The numbers are big enough and they're easy to read. That's why I like this. I have smaller fabric ones that I use for other things too. It's not as portable. But we want to be able to measure our 4 inches in the center of this fabric because these curling stitches at the tops and the bottoms, the sides, the corners, they impact the gauge and the way that we can measure without stretching. By doing this, I can come in and I can measure. I could put a marker here and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, and I could put a marker here and have my 4 inches wide and have margin on the sides. Same thing vertically. Super helpful, whether you're doing knitting or crochet and you want to get a truly accurate gauge. You want at least 1 inch of margin around the perimeter of the 4-inch square that you are going to measure. So the first mistake that we make is that we make our swatches too small. Do a good size swatch. Buy enough yarn if you're buying the yarn specifically for the project that you can do that. You can also think about making that swatch. Like if I was making a cardigan, I might make this swatch and make it a size that I want for a patch pocket or elbow patches or something like that. Maybe I don't want the pocket to be seen, but maybe it works to gently stitch it inside the back so that we have a little pocket in the back where I could pop my lip gloss or something. Be creative and think about it so that way it's not a wasted fabric. Talk about some other things about too. So really what I want you to do is go big or go home, right? No, not quite, because I want you to have fun. Oops. I want you to learn how to read your work. On the knitting, we're going to trace this down. Here's that active loop right here. So I know that it's the V right here with the points going down. That is the stitch that I'm counting. There's outside of it. There's the other side of it right here. If you're counting it where the V is going up, then you are in between 2 stitches. So learn to read your work. And this is where frogging is really important. Don't just rip it, rip it, rip it. Learn how to frog by gently pulling out 1 loop at a time so that you can understand and see what is happening. What are the mechanics that are happening with that stitch? Going that one. But keep it simple. You do not have to be, don't make yourself crazy with this either, okay? Start simple. Measure in the middle. So so here's my 4 inches in the middle of this one. Learning to read your work and seeing where your stitches stack up in crochet. It's slightly different. It's not as direct of a column. Here's the top of the stitch over here, and then here's the stitch itself, and then it comes down. So you do have to analyze your stitches in your work so that you know what you're looking at. Should you wash it before you commit? Before you block, should you wash it, block it, and all that sort of thing? Here's my general rule of thumb on that, is that it depends on the yarn that you are using. Something like this acrylic Red Heart Super Saver, as a general rule, no, you don't have to wash it and block it. But if you're making a sweater and it has some open stitches in it, yes, you probably should. Did you know that you can actually do that without cutting your yarn? I could just take this and wash it and dry it and let it lay out and dry if I wanted to be able to pull it out later. But in doing that, it does set the yarn. If you've ever stitched up something and even for a few minutes you stitched it up and you took it out, you notice that the curl and the bends start to already set into our yarn. Washing and blocking helps to really set those stitches, but it's also going to give you a lot of information about your yarn. Some fibers have a lot of drape to them once they get wet and the stitches set together, and then that relaxes a little bit. Some people refer to it as stretching, and technically it is not stretching, it is relaxing, which is a little bit different. Stretching is, think about like a rubber band stretches. A lot of times this is just a relaxing. The fibers are rigid from their manufacturing process, and then they just relax into what you've made them into. So know your fibers, understand them. Things that have linen in them in particular, linen and hemp and things of that nature, are more prone to relaxing. Some of your alpaca and llama fibers, they don't have the same level of natural inherent elasticity that sheep fibers have. But then again, some of those fibers will actually, with washing and use, will actually pull in tighter. And the stitches that you use will also impact the way that your fibers respond. Here's another really important tip in swatching. If you are making something that is going to be a garment or a wearable, I want to encourage you to, if you're washing and blocking, that you will please do part of your blocking process the way that you're going to use the fabric. So in the case of, say, a sweater, instead of just washing it and blocking it flat on a table, which is fine while it's drying, hang it this way. Use thumbtacks and pin it to your bulletin board, whatever, and let it hang there for several days and see how it responds. I have a cute little jumper that I made that the bottom has a pointy lace with beads on the end of it. But what I didn't do that. And when I finished it, because I did swatch for general gauge and it fits beautifully, but what I didn't count on is that there was a little bit more nylon in the yarn. And so when I washed it, and all of the points of the lace edge have a bead on them, and I hung it upside down and I pinned at each of those beads so it would really make that hem pronounced. But the nylon aspect of that yarn pulls it right back in. So it looks great. Like as soon as it's dry and I take it down, it looks great. But by the time I wear it once and I've moved around in it, it has softened back up and those points are not quite as pointy. They're a little bit more rounded. It's fine. Nobody but me actually knows. Well, now you know. But anyway, these are the kinds of things that we need to take into account. It is a lot of steps when we are new to learning and understanding what our yarns do. But the more that you create this database of knowledge, and understanding about the fibers that you use most frequently, the less of a huge, tedious task it needs to be. And that is really my point. That is where I really want you to get your mindset shifted from swatching is a horrible chore to swatching is like dating. Swatching is just an experiment in learning and understanding how this yarn and fiber works with my uses, my patterns, my tools, my techniques, my body ergonomics and movement. Because I can give you information on how a yarn interacted for me, but you could have a slightly different experience because you are the distinguishing factor in all of our projects. Okay, that's a lot, right, you guys? So let's do a quick recap. Swatching is like dating, right? Helping our yarn and our hooks and our patterns to get to know each other, to test them out together. Are we happy or are we creating a bad marriage? Don't do that. It's not good. Make your swatch big enough so that you are measuring with margin, a minimum of 1 inch of margin around your 4-inch block. The bigger, the better. Wash and block your swatch if the fiber calls for it specifically. And if the type of stitch calls for it specifically. And if you feel like that's a waste of yarn, start creating all of your swatches the same size so you can sew them together and make a blanket or a scarf or use them for patchwork pockets. Well, how fun would that be to like put your swatches as a patchwork on a denim jacket or a sweatshirt hoodie or something? That would be really fun. It would be unique and creative. Consider some fun things like that. They also make great embellishments for throw pillows for your living room and tote bags and all kinds of fun things. So get creative about what you're doing with your swatch so it doesn't feel like wasted yarn. When you're swatching, also use the stitch that your pattern calls for. If you are swatching for a particular project, use the stitch the project calls for. If you are swatching simply for the experience of understanding how you and your yarn get along together, totally different game. Okay, let's see. What else? I got to take a look at my list here. All right. That's where we're at, you guys. So, does this mindset shift feel scary to you? Does it feel intimidating? Do you think, I am not doing that? No way. Let me know. You can comment on this and tell me what you think. But if you want to get involved and get the support and in the encouragement and ask questions, I'd love to have you join us over in the Stitchery Journey community over on School. There will be an invitation for you down in the description of this video. You can pop in there. We have chat threads that are specifically about swatching where you can post your swatch, post what you learned from it, what you're struggling with it, get some feedback, get some encouragement, and it's super fun. We're having a great time over there. There's going to be more information. There's going to be more engaging that's going to happen with these kinds of videos that I'm teaching over there. So, Stitchery Journey, come and join us over there. And that is it for today, you guys. Again, I'm Suzi Quillen. I'm your stitching coach. I'm the Empress of Yarn here at Perfectly Knotty, and I am on a mission to help you feel really confident and excited about the projects that you make. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to subscribe and like and comment and all of those fun things.